and welcome to Time of the Month. And this is our first episode in 2023. Woohoo! Happy New Year, Linda!
Happy New Year to you, Laura, and everybody else out there.
Yes, this is the first one of the year, and for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, I'm Laura Digan and my co-host is Linda Pollock. And we've been doing this for a wee while now, Linda, haven't we?
I don't know how long. Is it a year or more than a year? I'm an old duff. I can't remember.
I think it might be just over a year. So yes, it's been quite a journey, and it's we're growing a real audience, and what's really great, I think, as well, is it's people that maybe would not normally go to church as well. So it's and for the people that are Christians, it's just this way of getting in and like exploring the text and exploring the characters of these women in the Bible that sometimes are forgotten about, who sometimes are unnamed, and sometimes are misunderstood. And today we have Bathsheba. So actually, Bathsheba, I think, can be misunderstood by, well, depending on who you're reading and the commentators. Yes, she's quite a there's lots of kind of lots of very beautiful art that features her, but I think maybe we miss her story. Linda, what do you think?
I think she's misrepresented more than anything else. I think people in their longing to defend and hold King David up as righteous in every way, shape, form, they do her a disservice and misrepresent her terribly, maliciously, wickedly. And I think that it's the burden of women throughout history, particularly throughout Judeo-Christian history, that women are misrepresented for the convenience of elevating men.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to say that. It breaks my heart to say that, but that's been my reality and my experience as I read the text and try to learn a wee bit more about the various characters. But anyway, I'm preaching there. My job purse will start to chafe. I better get off my high horse.
Well, do you know, actually, I think, well, from what you're saying there, Linda, actually, as I was like doing my research as well, I kind of came to the same conclusions, but we'll tease that out as we chat. And also, it'd be really great as whenever you're all listening to us, please do put your comments in the comments section on Facebook. And also, if you're on the website, what your thoughts are as well. We like to know what you're thinking, and also if what we're discussing changes your thoughts and your opinions at all, or if you think we're wrong. Well, we would like to know that too.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes,
we're
definitely.
Always open to conversation, and I think one of the things that's really important for us is that people feel safe to disagree.
Yes.
And safe to open their mind or to change how we think, because we have to keep growing and evolving and embracing the understanding that the Spirit reveals to us. Because I mean, you can have the best brain in the world and you can break everything down and apply all kinds of different kind of literary criticism to the scriptures, but at the end of the day, often that's just baggage. And what we want to do, I'm sure you agree with me, Laura, is to hold the scripture up and say, Lord, speak. And
yes.
By his grace and by his Holy Spirit, open the word to us. Because, I mean, otherwise, what's the point? Just go and take a novel, great expectations, and debate that.
Yes, exactly. So Linda, could you just give us a wee brief insight into the story of Bathsheba? Because people might have seen the pictures of her usually bathing, in the nude,
Yeah.
But there's more to her than that, so it'd be really great to hear her story.
So if you want to read the story in the Bible, look at 2 Samuel chapter 11, and then go into 1 Kings chapter 1 and 2. So we believe that Bathsheba was the granddaughter of Ahithophel, who was King David's trusted counselor until he and Absalom got into together. And her name, Bathsheba, means daughter of the oath. She was bathing. It was just after her monthly period, her purification rituals, as a good Jewish woman would do, and she was bathing. Now, I reread the text again a couple of times for the first time in a long time. And like most people, I've always thought she was on the rooftop bathing and David looked out his window and saw her. Actually, David had wakened up from an afternoon nap and he was on the rooftop of his house and looked out and saw Bathsheba. Now, there's lots of different ways you can understand that. And maybe later on we'll talk about the Midrash understanding about how he came to see her. But he saw her. And he sent his servants to find out who she was. They came back and said she is Uriah the Hittite's wife. And Uriah was a foreigner, not a Jew. And he was fighting on behalf of King David and Israel and the God of Israel. And he was in battle at Rabbah. So he was away. Bathsheba was purifying herself. David saw her. He lusted after her, and he had his servants bring her to the palace. Mm-hmm. And there, the language is just very straightforward. He basically had sexual intercourse with her. There doesn't seem to be any kind of courtship, but the fact that she was married was against all the laws of God. So she went back to her house, and obviously it had to have been some time later. She sent word to David saying she was pregnant. And David sent his servants to get Uriah the Hittite from battle. He came, and his plan was to get Uriah drunk and then send him home to have relations with his wife. But Uriah refused to do that. Instead, he slept at the palace with the other servants. And David was horrified. Why did you do that? And Uriah, being a man of integrity, kept the Jewish law around battle and basically said, I'm not going to go and lie with my wife while my brothers in arms are on the battlefield. So then David, his deceit got greater, and he decided he would feed and get him drunk, and he did that and then send him home again, but it didn't happen. And of course, he again stayed at the palace. And then the next thing that happened was that David was scuppered because Uriah didn't go and lie with Bathsheba, trying to disguise the pregnancy as his. So he wrote a letter and gave it to Uriah the Hittite and to give to Joab the general. Joab was David's right-hand man. And the letter basically said, put Uriah at the most awful part of the battle on the front line and let him be killed. And this is what Joab did. Uriah carried his own death sentence. Joab had him sit at the front and among valiant men, and he was slaughtered. And then Joab sent word back with a messenger to King David that so-and-so was slaughtered, so-and-so was slaughtered. Quite detailed information about the battle, even including a woman throwing a millstone over the ball. And Joab told the messenger, if King David gets irate and upset, say this. And at the end of it all, say, and Uriah the Hittite was killed. So this is what the messenger did. Of course, David heard the news. So he thought he was scot-free. He sent, after a period of mourning and lamenting, he sent for Bathsheba, and she came and lived with him as his wife. And that's the first time she's referred to as his wife in the text. Then her pregnancy comes to fruition, a son is born. But in the middle of all that, Nathan comes to King David, the prophet Nathan, and basically tells David a parable, one of the few parables in the Old Testament. And David is outraged. He still has decency about justice and thieving. And basically, he's confronted by his own sin. And God's prophecy through Nathan is that David's house will turn on itself and there'll be a battle. Mm-hmm. And a long story cut short, and by the way, the baby that was born will die. So David confesses his sin. He falls prostrate on the floor before God and confesses and mourns and repents. And then after 7 days in sackcloth fasting, he's told the baby that is dead. And so he gets up and washes and has a meal. And he takes Bathsheba. At this point, sorry, I got it wrong before. At this point, he takes Bathsheba into the house as his wife. And what that's all about, and there's more about Bathsheba in a minute, but Bathsheba's grief is not mentioned. David's grief is talked about at length. Bathsheba's grief is not even hinted at. And then her son Solomon, on David's deathbed, Nathan comes again to Bathsheba, and there's a suggestion that David promised her Solomon would be the king. But of course, Solomon's not the firstborn son. And there's a wee bit of conflict. One part of the text says it's Adonijah, another part of the text says it's Absalom. So, of course, Absalom at this point then has been killed. So it should be Adonijah as the next king. And Nathan says to Bathsheba, go into David on his deathbed and say to him, look, remember you promised me my son would be king. Well, Adonijah has proclaimed himself king. So she went in and did this, but she added a wee bit to the story and said, you swore an oath to God. And of course, David said, well, then I'll uphold that oath. And he sends for Zadok and Nathan to anoint, Zadok the priest to anoint Solomon. Solomon is the king and Adonijah is in pieces. And then a wee bit later, of course, he comes to Bathsheba, Adonijah, and says, look, can you ask Solomon to give me Abishag, the Shunammite young virgin who kept King David warm on his deathbed? Can I have her as my wife? Now, it doesn't say that anything underhanded was going on, but in my mind, I think Adonijah wanted to get the Shunammite woman Abishag to tell the story that David did not say that Nathan and Bathsheba had concocted this story so we need Adonijah as king.
Yes.
So Solomon was more wise than Bathsheba. Bathsheba went to Solomon and said to him, listen, here's the story. And Solomon said, that scoundrel, he's going to die today. So he ordered his death and Adonijah was killed. Now, that's basically the story from Samuel and Kings. But there's a whole lot more to it than this. My immediate reaction when I hear this story is power rape.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Linda, because it's there's no. I feel as if she has no agency. You know, she had. You know, it's like David sees her, he wants her, he has her. She has no choice. You know, she's got no choice. You know, and it's like, you know, he's having her. He sees her and he just wants her.
Yeah.
And it's and again it's like and then we don't know if she wanted to be his wife, you know. So again, it's like, you know, she becomes his wife, he takes her as his wife. So, you know, she's raped, and then later on she has to, you know, marry a rapist. And there's you know, I find it personally a very disturbing story, and I do think we try to, and I think this is where I think a lot of these, you know, the imagery, you know, from the artists from the medieval times onward, you know, are, you know, naked, you know, bathing and all the rest of it. It's as if like, oh well, you know, she's kind of like, you know, she's you know, provoking
asking for it.
Asking for it. And it's, you know, taken away because we want so much to believe that, you know, David's a good guy. You know, we like David, and
he is a good guy, and he is righteous, and he's all the things. And we look at his psalms, and we're touched and profoundly moved. And the reality is that he's human, like us all. Now, please God, we would never want to rape anybody. And maybe in that cultural context, it was different. However, what he did was wrong in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the law.
Yes.
He took another woman, a woman who was married to another man. And in those days, Bathsheba was the possession of Uriah, not the possession of David, whether he was king or not. And I think it's important for us, and I think we do this a lot to ministers in particular. We put them up on a pedestal, and the first opportunity of anything that might be slightly awkward, wrong, difficult, we knock them down. And you know, there's no opportunity for redemption. And I think that's one of the hardest things that ministers face. And David was absolutely bang out of order. And in our culture today, it would be the Me Too.
Yes.
And he, I hope, would be dealt with. But I think God dealt with it. And I think his own understanding that he was wrong, because of the prophet Nathan's parable of the man coming and stealing the one little ewe when he had hundreds of ewes to have for himself anyway. I think that parable gives us the chance to see God's redemption and how God views us. God doesn't see us as, well, I believe God sees us as the most beautiful, wonderful, loving creatures. And yet God also sees the mess we make and sees the hurt we cause and the wickedness that we're capable of. But I think that this parable and this story of Bathsheba's rape gives us the opportunity to say about who God is, to say how big God's love is, how we live with the consequences of our wickedness and our sinfulness, like the consequences of David's wickedness. But I think that also what it does is it tells us that God will clean it up and God will say, I still love you.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to deal with these consequences, but I still love you.
Mhm. Yeah. And do you think, see with Bathsheba, thinking about whenever she'd went to David, on his deathbed and says, you said that, you would, Solomon would become, your heir. Do you think, well, it's like, well, I've had to endure all this. I'm making sure that I'm getting something, that it's not been for nothing, that there's something there that
Well, I think, I don't know, according to the text, I don't know that it was her idea. It was the prophet Nathan's idea. Now, if the prophet Nathan had a hotline, if you like, to God, maybe I'm trying to harmonize the text too much, but it would seem to me that maybe he's acting on something God has told him to act upon. Certainly, there was no I mean, the order for the oldest son to inherit the father's wealth was clearly established. But remember, David was only the second king, and David wasn't Saul's son. So there was no precedent set for the firstborn to have the throne. And if you read again in the text, it tells us that the king decides who the next king is going to be, who his successor is going to be. So in our language today, Charles could say, oh, well, it's going to be Harry, or it's going to be Louis, or it's going to be Charlotte, or it's going to be Princess Beatrice. So it's the king who decides. So it may well be that Nathan, acting maybe not from a word from God, but acting on his own wisdom and on his own intelligence. Let's face it, that's often how the Spirit leads us. So I think it doesn't seem to me that she doesn't appear to be a woman of deceit, and she doesn't appear to be a woman of what can I get out of this? Because if she was pregnant by David, she may well have wanted to get something out of it right there and then, and she could have said, "Get rid of my husband." If she was a money grabber or a status grabber.
Well, this was what I did read that from a commentator.
Wow. Which one?
Just one of them that again this way that I think that they're trying to be kinder possibly to David than what they should be, but it's that they had suggested that because the all the houses and all that were all very close together. She had, kind of got herself out there parading herself, so it's to entice him, but this was because she wanted him to then get rid of her husband and but I'm a bit dubious about that. I do not think that was the case. I think that's people just trying to
justify David.
Yes, I justify it. Yes. And then another thing I had come across, and I had, thinking about the justifying. Now, is it in the midrash that is it in the midrash where they say that Satan had been involved in this?
Yes.
And
yes, he was out looking, and Bathsheba was behind the screen, and David saw a bird. He was looking at this wee bird, and he actually drew an arrow back to kill the bird. He missed the bird and split the screen, and that's all Satan's doing. And of course, he saw her naked and wanted her. Well, come on. How much power does Satan have? Number one. And number two, why would you come on and kill a wee bird?
I know.
Number three, what kind of screen was made so flimsy that an arrow would split it down the middle at just at the right time when Bathsheba was coming out naked?
Yes.
And four, is David, according to this picture, so feeble that just one look by chance and he had to have her? Oh, no. Who
And
knows?
and then you think he's the king, he's probably got
Probably
lots
was.
of women, nurse
Lots.
outfit.
Yeah, yeah,
Does
and
he
he's got all
need
his concubines as well, you know. But
and
here's the question I want to ask. I want to ask, why was he having a nap when it was the spring and it was the time for kings? The text says the time for kings to be out doing battle. What had happened? What had changed in David to make him go from being the man who slaughtered thousands upon thousands? Not that I like that or anything, but his reputation as a great warrior. What had happened to make him be in
oh,
his bedroom having a wee nap?
do you know that's I think there might be something in this, Linda, because it could be that he's got maybe like PTSD, if he's been out there, he's been, you know, battling, fighting, he's seen all this stuff happen before him. It could be that he's in a depression, you know.
It may well be, and because we know from other psalms that he did suffer from these terrible, terrible seasons of deep,
Uh-huh.
profound grief. But that
Hmm.
doesn't give me the excuse to go and rape somebody, you know.
No, no, but it could suggest what a reason why he was not maybe
Battle.
his usual self, it could well, be a suggestion of that. I had not realised, Linda, that if David features within Islam.
I know, it's just fascinating, isn't it? He was a
Uh-huh.
prophet, considered to be a prophet in Islam, yeah.
Yes, and but they don't think that so they think that prophets are infallible.
Uh-huh.
So again, that was and it was people trying to cause trouble that suggested that added extra onto this story.
Yeah,
That it was only after Uriah was killed in battle that Bathsheba then became David's wife,
yeah,
and that seemingly they said that at that time, if your husband had died in battle, you couldn't get married again. So because
yeah.
David married her, then they added, the people that were against this then added all this,
Yeah.
negativity and like all this, the rumors and all the rest of it to the story.
And did you also read about in the Midrash again how they believed that soldiers going off to battle would give their wives a certificate of divorce so that if they were killed in battle, then there would be no hesitation for them to be allowed to get married quickly. So that we create such stories and such complications to try and harmonize and justify something that's wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even in our lives today, we do that, don't we? We look at the current crisis in the NHS. Rishi Sunak today makes a statement about mathematics, trying to deflect people from the seriousness of what's going on. And his health minister yesterday said, "Oh no, it's all the flu and COVID and strep A that's caused this." And they're refusing to listen to the truth of what the doctors and nurses and medical people are saying. So we want we want to try and cover our tracks. We want to try and make things not seem the way they are. But the reality is, own what you've done. Be
Uh-huh.
honest and own your bad behavior, own your sinfulness, own your diminishing of yourself and of others and of God, and allow God to heal, transform, and bring new life out of it. But even in history, we can't do that with somebody like King David because we're afraid. But what does it say about him? What does it say about our faith? What does it say about our God? It doesn't say anything about our faith or our God other than God is gracious and wonderful and can see beyond the stupid pettiness that we can't see beyond, you know?
I know. And see that I think it is a wonderful example of, because so often in life people think the things that they do are they separate them from God,
Yes,
and
yes.
actually for most people haven't done actually anything nearly as bad as what
But see, if,
David's
if
done.
you're
But
exactly, and
he's still, he repents, he's called out, he repents, and God still loves him. God still, he's still loved. And I think that is like such a wonderful example that actually, even the worst things, if you are sorry for what you've done, you know, God doesn't hold it against you.
I think we have God, we make God in our image, and because our minds are so small, we think God's small, and we think that God cares about our sin and all the wickedness. God keeps a big book. Oh, Linda did this that day, and she didn't do that the other day, and she did this day, and she should have done that, but she couldn't and didn't. And oh, God help her. I don't think for 1 minute God really cares about that. I think
No.
God cares. Come on, come close to me. Let's see
Yeah.
how deep we can go together.
Mhm.
And I think that we create formulae all the time to make God accessible. And there is no one formula. There are no formula that are created by human beings that can make God accessible. And when Jesus came humble and vulnerable, trusting human beings, he modeled for us that God is no threat to us and that God longs for communion with us, for union. And I think that it's too easy for us to say, oh, well, I mean, I'm saved. And as long as I repent, I'm okay. That's just nonsense. That's just that's just us creating a theology of convenience. What was it Bonhoeffer talked about? Cheap grace.
With grace, yeah.
No,
Uh-huh.
cheap grace. I don't want cheap grace. I don't need cheap grace. I've already got all the grace that God has in God's heart for me. And
Mhm.
if I can get away from following these petty little rules, which is just like the Old Testament law, and follow the one rule, love God with all of my being, every possible part of me, and my neighbor as myself, then that's got to be that's got to, for me, that is the way. That is the
Uh-huh. Oh, most definitely. And you think if, David within this, he was far from God, whenever he did what he did. And then you would hope that as he comes back, you know, to loving God, that then actually transforms that relationship, with Bathsheba, because you think, well, she'll be grieving, grieving the loss of a child, grieving the loss of a husband, then moving into this, life that she hasn't chosen for herself. And you would like to think that, and again, I know I'm like putting a lot into the text here, and like imagining a lot in it, but you would hope that as David has returned, to God, that within that relationship there is healing and understanding and the opportunity for Bathsheba to actually, you know, be able to be, without the hurt and the pain.
yeah. And I think often what I'm guilty of doing is imposing my 21st century understanding upon the text. And she was nothing and nobody. Bathsheba was nothing and nobody. That's why David could have her like she was a
Mm-hmm.
chocolate biscuit, and then her choice. Do you honestly think he would have let her stay outside the palace when she was pregnant? I don't think so. So again, her choice was removed from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to think that she fell in love with him and it was all hunky dory, but why would she? He'd raped her. Our baby had died because of his behaviour, if we trust what the text's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I would question that text that God would punish an innocent child because of another man's sin.
Yes.
But she was part of the harem. I mean, I would assume my 21st century romance would say, oh no, she was his favourite, and she would be with him every day, the way a modern day woman would be with her modern day man today.
Mm-hmm.
No,
No.
and the fact that she conceived and gave birth to Solomon, I, I don't know how many other sons did he have, the other women and daughters. Never mind the sons. How many other daughters did he have that we don't even hear about? So, um, but for me, the overarching thing is grace. That I hope her life was better afterwards. I hope and pray, and I hope that his transformation. And I think he did transform. He did realize. And I hope that he administered and continued to administer grace throughout the rest of his reign. And I wish that we could just say warts and all, like Oliver Cromwell. That's the way God sees us. I know people who think you've got to change before God can love you. I know somebody who said to me, you preach too much about love and not enough about judgment. And then my response to that is God's judgment's restorative, not punitive. And we need to get our head away from this notion that God's sitting up in heaven with a big stick ready to beat us. We need to transform how we see God and let that transform how we live and how we love and how we serve.
Yeah. So thinking about today, Linda, thinking
Yep.
about Bathsheba's story and how it speaks into our lives today. And I was well, actually not that, like, a few weeks ago, I had heard a story on the radio. They were talking about because I think there was a conference, a UN conference, and they were talking about women being raped during war, so rape as a weapon.
Absolutely.
And there was a woman who actually was a woman, but she was so eloquent and so full of like understanding, but she had been a product of rape. Our mother was a Bosnian, raped during the Bosnian War, and she was she'd been brought up by two journalists who'd got her out of the country, and but you're thinking, oh my goodness, but now she she campaigns, she's an activist, and it's and you think in this day and age, this is what's still happening, and this is still how women are getting treated, women and girls are being treated. It's just, you're like, oh, well, it just defies belief, doesn't it, really?
It does. And I mean, wherever you stand in the Harry Meghan thing, you look at how Meghan's been treated in the newspapers. Even if 10% of what she's supposed to have done is true, it's still not good enough to treat her the way they've treated her. And it's about how women are in our culture and in our society and in the world at large. Why is it okay to rape them, to punish us, not them, us? Why is it okay for women to be thought of as less than men? Why are we not standing up? And even especially in the church, I was reading in the paper recently about 200 women in the Catholic Church and the movement for women to be ordained in the Catholic Church. And Francis, maybe he's going to drive that forward. It's this whole understanding that women are less than. And it goes back to the Adam and Eve story, I'm convinced of. Convinced. When the Jews don't even read that as this how creation happened, they read that as poetry reflecting a beautiful creative God, One of the things that also was reading in the paper this week was about the night marches being reclaimed, because it's not safe for women and girls to walk the streets at night. It must be terrifying. I live in a village. I'm not afraid in this village, but if it was in Glasgow, it might be. But it's about, one of the posters said, after protect women, and then it was scratched out and replaced with educate men. And we've got to start educating our children, our boys, as well as our girls. You see the way they interact as little children, that learned behavior, So we need to do something about that. But the whole thing about controlling women through sex and through rape, Sandhurst, for the past 20 years, there's been 177 reported accusations against the men in the officers' training academy against women.
That's shocking, isn't it?
177 women making. Now, how many didn't say a thing? Many
exactly.
Shut.
Yeah.
It's horrific, and we need to be starting. If we haven't already started, we need to be asking the questions, and in the church as well, we need to be standing up. This is not the way forward. I suppose one of the good things about the church, and I have to say something good, is that our new moderator in the Church of Scotland is a wonderful, strong woman, Sally Fulton, an amazing woman. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what she works with this year. She's Christian Aid, head of Christian Aid here in Scotland. And I love her. She's from the USA, I think she's from Georgia, but she's got the most gorgeous accent. But that aside, she's really clever. And she is hugely passionate and greatly gifted with wisdom and insight. And I can't wait to see how she leads us this year. I'm so excited about it.
Hi. Do you know, I'm hoping that there will be some guidance comes out, especially around Afghanistan. I'm really praying for that country, with with the, NGOs having to pull out. You know, you're thinking, what are these people left to? Like, especially the women and the girls, what are they getting left to? You know, because you're hearing like people selling their girls, you know, to be able
Yes,
to like
yes.
pay for, you know, to be able to buy food.
And what kind of man in his 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s would want a child 11, 12,
I
13?
know,
What
I
kind
know,
of sick creature would want that?
I
It's
know.
obscene, but we're responsible for that in this country
Oh
because
yeah,
we screwed up Afghanistan royally. And
yeah.
now women can't work, women can't go to university. It's obscene. What I want to ask this Taliban mob is, what are you so afraid of?
Aye,
What are you so afraid of that your women get educated?
aye.
What about?
I
And
know,
women,
like, you know, not realizing that if it wasn't for women, they wouldn't be there in the first
uh,
place. You know, I just like, I don't understand it. But I really hope that there'll be more coming out from the church about how we can actively support women and girls in Afghanistan, and not just, you know, not just through prayer, but actively support them.
yeah.
You know, I really hope that there is something that comes out. So, Linda, we've just got a wee minute before we finish. Do you have any? Do you have a good news story that we
Oh
could finish
yes.
on?
You know what I was reading? You know ABBA, one of my favorite groups in the whole world ever. Their song in 1979, Chiquitita.
Yes.
You maybe won't remember, but they used to be called Take Your Teeth Out. Well, they have given the rights, all monies of that song in 1979 to UNICEF, so that it could be used exclusively for the education of women and girls, and not simply academic education, but education about their emotions, their bodies, sexuality, HIV, everything. And I want to say, God bless ABBA.
Oh
God
yeah.
bless them for Chiquitita. I think the word Chiquitita means little girl in Spanish. And what's his name? The blonde guy. Oh, I forgot his name. Benny. No,
Born.
Bjorn was saying that in his mind, and that is 1979, he said this, that they all believed that the way forward for the world was to educate girls and women.
Uh-huh.
Praise the Lord.
Yes. Oh, indeed. Yes. Oh well. Thank you so much, Linda. And thanks. That's a good note to finish on. So it is, and we look forward to hearing all your comments on this about this podcast, your thoughts and opinions. We will read them. And just it'd be good to hear what you've got to say. So we will be back with you again next month. And so thank you for joining us. Have a great month. Be blessed, friends. And we will speak to you all soon. Bye for now.
Bye. See ya.